Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. We are heading into the second of our trilogy of crossovers. It's me, Jesse Starcher, and Mark Radulich sitting right over there. Mark, it's about to get spooky, buddy. Are you ready to talk about Elvira meeting Vincent Price?
First of all, the three comics that we chose to do for this series of crossovers, this is my favorite one by far. Wow. I'll tell you what, this is my shit.
Okay. It's interesting.
For real.
I as I was reading this, I was like, there was so many Hollywood elements to this. I bet it's going to speak to Mark a little bit. So I'm hoping, I don't know if that's the big hook that you had or if it's just Elvira's big boobs. I don't know.
I mean, that helps. I am a sucker for big boobs. I will, I might marry somebody that I shouldn't marry because they have big boobs. I'm just going to say that.
Boobaloobaloobies. All right. Oh, man. So, okay, we're going to do this similar to the last episode. We have two properties here that are being, properties, these are two people, two actual legit people that exist. They've crossed them over, and I will say that I know Elvira's been around quite a while, and I know she's been in print for quite a while too, but I've never read a comic. I don't believe
she's got a bunch of comics. In fact, they actually reference one of the ones in this one. This Elvira meets Vincent Price is a continuation of Elvira Goes to Hell or some shit.
Yeah, there is definitely some continuity here. There's other books that are referenced too, so that she was in prior to this, and so yeah, she's absolutely got some continuity going into this.
She's a staple. She's another one that is very much a staple of American culture. I don't know totally what her history is, but I think she started out as a comedian because of her presentation, her look, her cleavage. She started hosting these horror movie nights, and that's Elvira, people listening to this going, that's not what happened. I don't totally know Elvira's history, but I vaguely remember her being popular because she would be the hostess of an up all night horror movies and stuff like that. And then she had her own movie. She's just like Pee Wee Herman and a lot of comedians turned character. That character became synonymous with the fabric of American culture. And so people in the year of our Lord 2023, Elvira might not mean anything to, but growing up as a kid, Elvira was very present, and she stood out because now the goth, vampire,
goodness,
dark look is pretty common. But back then, if you look like Elvira, you stood apart from the rest of the known universe. So Elvira was a very unique person. And the actress who plays Elvira, I've always thought she had just shit tons of charisma. And here's the thing about her. She was funny. She was sharp. She was witty. Elvira, I think, is a very underrated performer. She did a lot of facial acting where she would react to things, and she always had this smell the dirty fart look to her. We live in the era of the superhero and everyone's overpowered and it just gets ridiculous, power creep and all of that. Elvira was very much able to handle herself as just an ordinary gal in a tight dress with her cleavage showing. She didn't take no mess. And I'm a huge fan of Elvira. So when we were looking at crossover books, and I saw the Elvira meets Vincent Price, and again, I wasn't a horror kid, but Vincent Price was very much a icon of my youth, if for no other reason than he was a Batman villain in the 60s Batman show. He's the voice in Michael Jackson's Thriller. Vincent Price was another one where he was ever present in the horror genre, but also he sort of transcended into American culture. And so you have, Vincent Price with a very unique voice to him and presentation, Elvira with a very unique look and presentation to her, and you put them together and you send them off on an adventure, and it's hilarious. This book is fantastic.
The history I had with Elvira, I mean, she really is, to me, the original goth hottie. My gosh, did she set a precedent?
Not for nothing, but when I talk about my dream girl, it's fucking Elvira.
Elvira, yeah. And you talked about how she was part of pulp culture.
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking this up because for some reason, what I equated her with was beer. She was a beer model for Coors in the mid to late 80s.
You know what a teaser is, darling? No? Well, let me, Elvira, give you an example. You can win $1,000 in the Coors Light Spring Green sweepstakes when I give you this phone number. Dial it, and if you're the 50th caller, voila, you win. But I ain't giving it to you just yet. Find out when at this Coors and Coors Light display. And that, darling, is a teaser. I'd give you another one, but I'm not that kind of girl. So, nobody's perfect.
So, there were commercials with her on it, and she brought this kind of like, it's not like innocent sexuality. It's more like, you know that she gets this as some freaky stuff. Like there was a film in '88 that was
Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Mistress of the Dark. Can't say I've ever watched it, but
I have. And Transylvania 65000. Oh yeah, I saw them both.
She's obviously an actress. She's involved in Hollywood. And then yes, let's get to Vincent Price. Vincent Price. I mean, my goodness.
Egghead? Is that the villain I'm thinking of? Was he Egghead?
Let's find out. What did
I got it. I got you. You keep going.
Okay. So now, if you just Google Vincent Price and his films, I mean, we're going back to the late 50s. No, I'm sorry. I have it up
here. His filmography, the list of Vincent Price works. His first movie was 1938, Service de L'Eau.
He was 27 at the time.
Yep. 1939, The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex. 1940, I'm not going to read all of these, but 1940,
there's a
Green
ton
Hell, The Invisible Man Returns. He was, steady acting through the 40s. Then we're into the 50s with the Champagne for Caesar, The Adventures of Captain Fabian, The Las Vegas Story, The Son of Sinbad, Ten Commandments, 1956.
His filmography goes all the way up to 1995.
Yeah.
And it was a posthumous release at that point, but I guess it is actually, as far as starring goes, is 1990. He was in Edward Scissorhands as the inventor.
Dude, he's in fucking Dead Heat.
I know, man. His list of films that he has done is just amazing. By the way, he was Egghead in the 1966 Batman.
Yes, he was.
Okay, a storied actor. Personally, have I watched a whole lot with him in it? No. Was he an influence on or a major star in some horror films? That was easy. I knew that even without watching some of this stuff. It was like, that's how much of a presence that he had. Other people talked about Vincent Price and his work. I think our good friend Billy D. Delicious. He's done some shows here recently on Magazines and Monsters that starred Vincent Price. So, okay. So I know about both of these characters. Obviously, it seems like I know probably a little bit more about Elvira going into this thing. Didn't know what we were going to get here, to be honest. Like, I was like, what? Number one, Vincent Price has been dead since 1993.
Just like Weekend at Bernie's, Elvira just dragging around his corpse.
I didn't know what, like how. Okay, are we going to go back to the 90s? That's what's great about comics, folks. You can see that, okay, this premise is here. Can we make it happen, and how are we going to make it happen? AI is getting there, but we can't put Vincent Price back in a movie just yet with Elvira, so let's do a comic with them both. And, of course, the way that they set it up is Vincent Price is still passed away, and he's a ghost in this book, which is great. I think it's perfect, especially with Elvira being involved.
Some of the gags with him as a ghost in this book are hysterical.
There are some good parts.
Like, they get out of a car at one point, and he just phases through the car, and she kind of looks at him. She's like, could you not make it obvious you're a ghost? It's going to freak people the fuck out. It's great.
Yeah, they do some good stuff with this combo here. So let me go ahead. Let me dive into the synopsis real quick. Our creator, a guy that I don't know, but it is, I bet you I could probably look some stuff up and find out who he is. But I don't know if you read some of the comments, like as you were getting into issues by the writer here, David Avallone.
No.
He was pretty funny. Like, especially when we get into the 5th issue, like at the top, usually at the top of the next issue, they're going to do a recap of what happened in the previous issues. Here's what's happened so far in our story. In the 5th issue, he's like, well, they wanted me to do a 5th issue. So I just did this. Here you go. He pops in and out every once in a while, breaking the kind of like, obviously he's breaking the fourth wall because he's talking to the reader, kind of giving us an idea of what's going on kind of behind the scenes in regards to the stories, which is great. But anyway, David Avallone is our story writer here. Art by Juan Samu and colors by Walter Pereira. And letters by Taylor Esposito with Elizabeth Charland. All right. So we got 5 issues here, 4 of which are definitely one contained story, and the 5th issue, which is just kind of a one-off. But in our first issue, Elvira meets Vincent Price, Elvira struggles as she's pitching her horror show, a horror-themed show, to a streaming service called Dearthflix. Exhausted.
By the way, between that and Streamberry.
Right. At the end of the day, she decides she goes home, she drowns herself in a little bit of alcohol, goes to sleep, finds herself in a dream world where she meets Vincent Price. And he reveals to her that there was once a lost film called Rise of the Ram and convinces her that they desperately need to find it as the fate of humanity is at stake. When she awakens, Vincent Price is actually very, very real. He's non-corporeal, but he's very real. And the two decide to head off to try and find this film because supposedly this thing was filmed but never released. Rise of the Ram is out there. Vincent Price is like, we've got to go find it. They show up at this producer's house, and as they bring up the topic of Rise of the Ram, which is great. By the way, all these people that had interacted with Vincent Price are like, dude, how are you still alive? Because he shows up and he's like, hey, we're looking for this. The producer ends up getting vaporized. The servant of Amun-Ra shows up. They end up leaving the producer's house. The producer's dead. They trick this servant of Amun-Ra to go back to where that came from, and they have to leave there with no film in hand. So issue 2 sees the pair continue their quest, heading to England to find the film's director, Richard Rogue. This is where they learn the film's cursed history involving an incantation from a mysterious book leading to tragic events on the set. So it's kind of like this film was cursed. This is where we also find out that there's a screenwriter by the name of Ahmed who had the lead actress read this incantation that was actually a protection spell to keep Amun-Ra in his place and essentially protect the world. But when word got out about what had happened in there, the priesthood that served Amun-Ra went and tried to find the negative of the film, and that's what kind of led them on this goose chase. Now they know that Amun-Ra is trying to come back. They need to find this film in order to make sure Amun-Ra does not come back. They need to have this incantation that's on this film read. So there's a new host, Cleopatra, that Dearthflix has invested in. You essentially got Cleopatra, who is actually Amunet, who's going to read this incantation to bring Amun-Ra back in front of everybody using Dearthflix as a way of getting it across. Here is Vincent Price and Elvira running around trying to get this old school film so they can read the protection spell instead. So all this craziness happens, and it ends up finally by the end of things, Amunet is defeated as they get the Rise of the Ram played on Dearthflix instead of Amun-Ra taking over the world. And our final issue, because Vincent still felt at the end of that, he's like, I still have something else to do. So in our 5th issue, Vincent and Elvira become this pair of investigators after they find out about this lady by the name of Darlan, who was being stalked by Stanley Saliva, a horror director, who fell in love, I guess you would say, with Darlan, and she rejected him. They find out that Saliva orchestrated Darlan to be trapped inside of one of his slasher movies. They're able to find Saliva in the movie, and they use a legendary remote control to escape Saliva's clutches and find themselves in a new black and white setting. They also rescue Darlan out of that movie. Realizing they have saved the day, Elvira and Vincent say their goodbyes. But as he leaves, Elvira realizes she is now outside the Bates Motel, setting up a new adventure.
It's like a 4-issue story and then like a bonus issue.
Yeah, it really is.
I have like 4 issues worth of story here. Great, we only need 5. And I'm like,
yeah, you're going to get 4.
I only have 4. I like plotted this out for 4.
That's the way it goes. What do you think of the story here, Mark? I mean, this was, you said you liked it. You said it was great.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the story. I thought, again, Elvira being a Hollywood actress and all of that, it was fun to sort of play with that idea, some modern sensibilities with, the creepy producer and all of that. You have Vincent Price is like the mentor ghost going, hey, there is evil afoot and only you, Elvira, can help, save the earth from this, and I need you, and so they do. So it's a buddy cop adventure, almost like that video game setup where like they go on a mission, they defeat a boss, they go on the next mission, until they reach the end. One of the things I noticed, and I was reading this today, I was thinking about this. I was like, I got to bring this up with Jesse, is that one of the great things about Elvira is she has to get by on her wits and ingenuity. That's what I couldn't think of earlier. Ingenuity and her stubbornness, because she doesn't have superpowers. She's not a ninja. She's not like, she gets overpowered physically because she is a girl. She has no great physical strength. So at one point she's like swinging a bat or something. But for the most part, like, she can't fucking fend these people off. At one point she has like a guns drawn on her. She has to use her smarts to get out of it. So much of like kick-ass women is women kicking ass. And it's like, there's other ways to win a fight than brute force, which if you're a woman against most men of the same size, you're not going to win. And so I like the fact that they look at Elvira and they go, well, how would she get over on these people? How would she win? She wins by using her smart and her intelligence, her intuition, her cunning, which I thought was great. She goes up against some pretty like powerful, like godlike creatures, and she has to use again her wit and outthink them. And it was a lot of fun to watch. And the dialogue in this I thought was really amusing. It would be super serious and overdramatic in one panel, and then there'd be something like snarky and funny in the next panel. So I was amused by that. I was also like greatly amused by Vincent Price is like very foppish. But, like, he's very manly. He's very much like, I'm a man and I'm an adventurer, but I'm posh as well, I guess would be the way to put it. When we think about, like, masculinity, toxic masculinity, there is a way to be masculine and a way to be heroic without being super masculine. Yeah. You can absolutely be a gentleman hero. And that's what they're going for with him here. It's funny because we kind of accept James Bond as this, like, posh hero. But what everyone focuses now on is almost like how, we can't have him womanizing and things like that. It's one of the things I really got frustrated with the Daniel Craig movies was like nothing that made James Bond fun you can do anymore in the year of our Lord 2023. So instead, he's just an action hero in a suit. Mm-hmm. My James Bond, the Roger Moore James Bond, was very much like suave and sophisticated and posh, and because he wasn't necessarily a physical figure, he wasn't overly reliant on being physical. He had, he got over in different ways, and he had to be in a fight he could, but that wasn't really what made him him. And I like that they kind of went for the Roger Moore James Bond type with Vincent Price, which I think is a great gag for that actor.
When that's fully on display for me is when Vincent Price is facing like the 90s or 2000s slasher in the 5th issue, and Vincent Price is like, all of a sudden he becomes like a fencer, like he has a fencing blade that he's facing off with this guy who has this hacksaw coming after him. He's very eloquent and very very regal in his way of dealing with these people. And as far as nailing characters goes, I honestly can't be the one to say, oh, well, they didn't get him right because of XYZ, but I can tell you that it felt very much like Vincent Price to me. And it wouldn't be a smart idea to put somebody at the helm that doesn't know Vincent Price. I think they did a fine job in getting that character down. And Elvira, man, does she crack wise like she should. She always has the snarkiness, always has those kind of like quips that are sometimes somewhat sexual. Or, she's definitely got those jokes.
There's a lot of innuendo with Elvira.
Oh,
She was quite naughty.
Oh, yes. And so they seem to get her, too. I mean, they get her in here pretty well. Just like you said, thinking of them as a buddy cop, it just sounds so strange. But then you get thrown into this situation and they play off of each other so well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, it's good.
I wish we lived in an alternate universe where they actually made this like a movie. Like, I think Elvira and Vincent Price, like in an actual movie together and on an adventure, would have been hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Which you said it before. That's the fun of comics is that you are not limited by time and space. You can take any figures anywhere, real or imagined, and throw them together, and all you have to do is come up with a fun adventure, and you've got gold. And that's what happened here. Is they took these two that are just sort of linked by their connection to the horror genre and threw them in an adventure together. And it was magical. And I'll tell you, so this is a Dynamite book, and I don't know how well Dynamite comics sell these days. I don't know how any comics sell, to be quite honest with you. Of course, Bailey would hear, like, they don't. Next question. You know, you and I are fast approaching 50, and me sooner than you. And so, like, we know who these people are, but, like, my kids don't fucking know who Elvira is. They don't know who Vincent Price is. This is a great story, and it's one of those where I kind of want to, like, shout it from the rooftops, like, hey, there's fun stuff out there. Fucking get off of TikTok. Like, this is a really fun book, but nobody reads comics, and no one knows who these people are. And so the sad tragedy of Elvira meets Vincent Price is this is a really great story that everyone should read because it's so much fun, and no one will. Yeah. No one's even going to listen to this podcast.
The concept of this makes so much sense. Like, anybody who did not know this existed, it's going to be nice for them to go, oh, that actually happened. Visually, we got to kind of see it. I did also want to kind of give props to the artists here, like, and I'm sure this was part of the creators, the storytellers concept too, but for changing Vincent Price every once in a while to familiar roles that he's played, which makes it an interesting visual element to kind of keep it linked. Hey, this is a Hollywood actor, and oh, now he's this. Now he looks like this character. And I think at one point, Elvira's talking to him about the role he played in one of his films as an Egyptian or whatever, and he becomes that because that's what she sees him as at that moment that she's talking to him. Really neat. I thought that was a great concept. I want to talk about my favorite bit real quick before we finish up here. My favorite bit out of this whole thing was there is a point where Elvira and Vincent go to find Ahmed in Egypt. And Ahmed's like, hey, I've got the book. It's hidden in the tomb. Follow me. So they take off walking. Our antagonist has a couple thugs that are following Vincent and Elvira because our antagonist, Amunet, can't remember, wants to get her hands on the legitimate book because that's what holds all the power. You can read that incantation day after day off the internet. It won't do anything. But if you read it from the book, that's where the true power lies. She does not have that book. So that's why she sent these thugs after to follow Vincent and Elvira, because she knew they were going after the book. Now, that's a whole big setup for the tour guide that watches these thugs follow Vincent Price and Elvira, and she takes off walking, following them. So I was like, oh, okay, what's this girl going to get into? This is going to be interesting. We got a third or fourth person we're going to have to worry about that does actually factor into the plot at some point. But then in the next panel, two people that are on the tour watch the tour guide walk, and they actually contemplate following the tour guide, and they're like, wait a second. And somehow they are aware of what the script says, and they get so upset because, well, we're just written as two tour people on a tour, and they're like, why aren't we over at Image Comics? We would have so much more depth than what we have right here in these couple panels. Like, that didn't even need to be in this comic. That had no business being in this comic, but they thought it was such a great gag, and I agreed, because it was my favorite bit of this whole comic, was these two random people on a tour watching one of these characters follow the other characters that are following the other characters, and I was like, how many fucking characters are going to follow each other here? And then finally it stops there. But anyway, it was damn hilarious. I love the kind of fourth wall breaking they did with that. The fifth issue, like I said, was just kind of there. Like, they honestly stuck to, like, hey, I've got 4 issues. Okay, well, we want you to write 5. And he's like, well, shit, I've already expanded this thing as far as it can go. Okay, here's a 5th issue. It's just going to be some random thing. And that's kind of where they landed. I thought it was a neat concept, the whole Vincent Price saying, yeah, movies are essentially pocket realities, which, sets up the whole, let's go into this pocket reality. This girl got taken into one. We got to pull her out. And I thought that was a pretty cool concept. But, for what it's worth, that issue, there's a one-shot deal where they go in, they get her out of there, they save her a couple times, they find the skeezy guy, grab the remote, and escape. So it isn't really that heady, but it was fun. It was fun enough. I had a good time. So I don't have anything left here, Mark. You got anything?
Yep, I'm good.
Plugs then. What do you got going on?
All right, check out our landing page where we post all of our content, w2mnet.com. Our YouTube is W2Mnet on YouTube. We have a Twitch, same deal. I'm at Mark Radulich on TikTok, where I put 10-minute segments of any podcast that I do, plus concerts that I go to, and I go to a bunch, and some goofy stuff I do with my kids. Hey, you know what else I do on there? Naked karaoke. I'm not naked in the TikTok, but the place where I did the karaoke was clothing optional.
Oh, great. That is Mark Radulich. I'm Jesse Starcher. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
I'm a natural beauty myself. I don't wear any makeup.
She's very beautiful.
Yeah, she is very beautiful.
Yes.
Vincent knows vampires. If he says you're beautiful.
Well, Vincent has been in almost every movie I've ever shown on my show. Vincent owns stock in my show. Yes, points. You've been in quite a few Poe movies on my show.
I know it.
Some of them more Poe than the others.
You're so right. Poe bitches they were.
Thanks for joining us. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.